some truths here about multiple regression. And you're going to see this in the output that we go through, which is coming up next couple of classes. That multiple regression is about prediction. It's not about process. It's not about describing process. I am not, I promise you, I am not going to take you into advanced statistics, because this is an introductory statistics course. So I'm not going to do that. But I know something about advanced statistics. I teach it. I would hope I know something about it. And I do know analytic procedures that really work well for describing the process by which predictive variables affect an outcome variable. And it's not multiple regression. It's path analysis, yeah. But it's not multiple regression. And you'll see that in the output. I'm going to present to you examples of how multiple regression is telling us a lot about the ability of the model that we build with the predictive variables that we have, how well that model predicts people being at higher or lower levels of some outcome variable construct, but is iffy and tenuous in its ability to describe the process by which predictive variables actually affect outcome variables. So good on the prediction, but describing or explaining process of effects, much shakier. Unfortunately, people can confuse the two, this prediction and describing process. And there are persons who have tried to take multiple regression and expand it into the describing process area. You know, it may be controversial. People may have different views on this, but it doesn't do a good job at describing process necessarily. I mean, it might in some instances with some outcome variables and some predictive variables, but not others. So, you know, it's not good to take a statistical procedure and expand it beyond its primary capabilities and purpose, because then you get it into rough waters and controversy, and there are suitable alternatives that actually work well in these other areas. So, you know, I work with a lot of dissertation students, and they do multiple regression for describing effects, how variables affect, how predictive variables affect some outcome variable. And sometimes it works better than other times. But I have more than one example of where what multiple regression had to say about how predictive variables affect the outcome variable has been incomplete or wrong. Because it's not meant to do that. It's meant to build predictive models. And you see, predictive models don't care about processes by which variables affect other variables, by which predictive variables affect an outcome variable. They just care about prediction. And the more variance is accounted for on the outcome variable by your model, then the better of a job that model does at predicting people's scores in an outcome variable measure. And if you have a reliable and valid measure, then the better of a job that model does at predicting people at being at higher or lower levels of that outcome variable construct. And it doesn't matter what it has to say about effects. All that matters is that it can predict well. And multiple regression does that great. And validating or not validating models that are put forth to predict qualities in people in terms of that outcome variable construct. But to then try to extend it into describing the details about how predictive variables actually affect the outcome variable, much shakier. And you'll see the two conflated and brought together and moved between when people talk about multiple regression. So you should be thinking about multiple regression primarily in terms of its ability to say something about prediction and about how well a model predicts, because that's what it's built to do, and it does that very well. So multiple regression is mostly about building predictive models to predict things. You'll need to know this, I'm going to say right now. This will be the first time you're going to hear about it. Predictive models are often compared with each other in multiple regression. And the last model in a series of models to provide a significant increase in the R-square is the winner. Is the best fitting or most predictive model. And that's it, man. And we hit the road. We start applying that model. If the best fitting model fits well with the data, then we can take it on the road and apply it for making predictions about people. Yeah, that's great. Multiple regression has a very limited role in describing the process, which consists of conditions and mechanisms by which predictive variables ultimately affect an outcome variable. It does better with conditions. It does not do well with mechanisms. And you got to do both, or you have an incomplete description of process. This is much better accomplished with more sophisticated data analytic procedures, for example, path analysis, latent variable structural equation modeling. Hopefully you all apply to the doctoral programs here, and then you'll hear all about path analysis and latent variable structural equation modeling from me, I hope, as the river rises and the well runs dry. Other than that, but not in here. The boundary can get blurred between multiple regression as a predictive tool, yeah, and multiple regression as an explanatory tool. My hand is wavering back and forth. So at that, at best. I mean, in some instances, it can do, respectable job at that, but it's tenuous and highly variable. It is, in fact, primarily a predictive tool. It's never a good idea to stretch any data analytic procedure beyond its primary capabilities and purpose, especially when there are more suitable alternatives. When it comes to prediction, though, multiple regression rocks. Rocks, man. Rocks. Okay, so I have a question for you. I'm always interested when people think about this. So I want you to speak up. When has, because it has, I know that because you're here right now, so I know it has. When has a multiple regression equation been applied to you for making predictions about you and contributing to decisions about you? Can anybody think of, I'm going to sit back here for a minute and hear from you. Anybody want to tell me about a time when a multiple regression equation has been applied to you? You know, they're not only applied to people in studies, those are just for validating the models for predictive purposes. Then they're taken on the road. They're applied to people, okay? Lots and lots and lots of people. In fact, I would say about 98% of people. There are people who are living deep in the woods off the grid, and they eat coyote on a regular basis and haven't seen the inside of a store for a long time. Maybe for them, a multiple regression equation hasn't been applied to them, but to everybody else, it has been. Anybody got any ideas about that? When multiple regression equation has been applied to you? So say it a little bit louder. I heard part of that, and I agree with you, but say it louder.
The times of day that I eat, how often, what I eat.
Yeah, so say more about that.
Okay, so I guess the times of day that I eat, like breakfast, and how often, whether or not I eat breakfast or lunch,
Okay,
or breakfast or dinner, and what I eat, whether it's
so those are the things people are predicting about you.
okay.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Based on what? What information?
Based on
What's the information they've gathered on you to make those predictions?
speaking my habits.
Huh?
My habits, my day-to-day habits.
Yeah, okay. But I mean, but where are they getting this information from? So they're not like following you around and observing what you do during the day. They're not. So so what information have they gathered to make those particular predictions that you just mentioned in terms of what you eat, when you eat, what you're, what you like to buy, in terms of food, and you go into other areas too, various consumer goods, okay? So various predictions about you in that regard. What information and what's in their model? So what information are they relying on for making those predictions? How are they getting that information from you? Sure, internet searches, Amazon, when you have that list of things come up in front of you for you to look at, that's not a random list of things for you to look at. Okay, they've collected data on you in terms of previous purchases, right? Okay, and then they make predictions about the types of things you like. and thus the list comes up in front of you when you go onto Amazon. Things you might consider. That's not a random list. That's a predictive list based on their predictions about you and what you prefer to buy. When you go to the store, and I think you're also referring to this, when you go to the store and they ask you for that special card that you get, you know, the Albertsons, you know, Albertsons Club, okay? And then if you buy it, then you get like a 5% off your receipt. Right. Well, you know, that's information, right? They see all of your purchases. So this is all information they get to you as to what you purchase. And what you purchase and how much you spend, okay, and when you go in there to shop and everything else, that all goes into a model that is then used for their own purposes in terms of what they present to people in your area, for example, in terms of food, and may influence advertisements that you might get from the store regarding food, depending on the store. Okay, because predictions are made about you and your particular buying habits. So you're absolutely correct. Absolutely. Those are all predictive models. Information gathered about each one of you in terms of your buying preferences goes into models, and predictions are made about what you like to get. And then you're presented with those things so that you'll be looking at only those things that they think you tend to want to buy, so you'll buy more. So that's very true. So regression models are used there. That's good. Other thoughts? And that applies to every single one of us in here. Hey, James, how you doing, man? Yeah, I'm recording right now, by the way, just so you know. So that applies to each of us. That's done to each and every one of us. You can't get on the internet and leave the internet and have any sort of interaction with it. That's why we have all this concern about privacy and what information is gathered on you and what is going to be done with that information. You get all these privacy notices, what we collect on you, what we do with that information. Do you want to opt out of this or opt out of this other thing? Because they're collecting information for predictive purposes about you. And then that influences what they present to you in a variety of different contexts. So that's true. That's all multiple regression. That's all multiple regression at work. That's all. That all is based on models that have been previously validated by multiple regression analyses. Other ways that multiple regression has been applied to you.
Yes, I would say probably college admissions.
That's exactly correct. Now, colleges vary, and there's been changes in this over time, so I'm thinking about this a little bit more traditionally. However, the only thing that's changed in terms of making predictions about people for college admissions is in terms of the information that's in the model. They still make predictions. And some schools do it more traditionally, and other schools do it less traditionally. But that just influences the information that's in the model, not the fact that they're building models to make predictions. So say more about that. I think about when you were applying for college, when you were a high school senior. You filled out forms, right? Information about you having to do with your high school experience?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't know about you personally. You might have gone to some school where, you know, it didn't involve any of that kind of stuff that people would ask you. It was, you know, it was much different type of information. So I don't know about you, but when you think about people generally speaking, when you're asked to fill out a college application, what types of things do they ask you about?
Like what you did outside of school, what interests did you have?
So extracurricular activities. Mhm. Right. All right. And then you need to get them transcripts, so they get your high school GPA, they find your rank in your class, maybe they get letters of recommendations, and they'll go through and they'll rate what's being said about you, and they'll put that on a scale, higher and lower. As you pointed out, extracurricular activities, AP classes that you may have been in or not in. Okay, so that's various information about your high school experience. okay? And that information often goes into a regression model as predictive variables. And what they will predict from that is the GPA they expect you to have at that particular college, typically after 1 year. They're interested in after 1 year what your GPA will be. And how did they validate that model? Well, they have students who are currently at the school, and they have a lot of information from those students in terms of their high school, their time in high school. And for those that have been there at least a year, they also have their GPAs. So they can go into their files, these students who are already going to the college, they can go into their files and they can collect all this data, GPA data, extracurricular activity data, letter of recommendation rating data, rank in class data, on it goes, okay, in terms of information about the student's high school career, their high school experience. I think I mentioned extracurricular activities. So different types of things from their high school, time in high school. And then they can predict how they can run, they're going to run a multiple regression analysis to see how that information in the model having to do with students' time in high school, how well that predicts their actual GPAs that these students have after 1 year. And when they find a close fit between the predicted scores coming out of the model and people's actual GPAs, they go, great. If we have this information on students, it predicts well what their GPAs are going to be after a year. So then there you are as a high school senior, and they're asking you those types of questions that goes into the model and makes a prediction about you, about what your GPA is going to be after you're there at that school for a year. And only if it reaches a certain level, I mean, you know, if the prediction is too low, they're not going to admit you. And if the prediction is higher, they'll take into account other things. Maybe they'll still take you. If it's above a certain level, they're probably going to take you. But that's all based on a prediction that's made about you. When you're a high school senior, they have no way of knowing what your GPA is going to be after 1 year of being at the school. You're just a high school senior. You're not going to the school yet. You're not going to the college. But they can predict it, and they do. And that's occurred for most people applying for college. So that's not, you know, that's not an innocent thing you're doing, filling out that form. It all goes into regression equations. And predictions are made about you, and predictions are made about you, GPA decisions, anticipated GPA, and that contributes to final decisions. Who here has applied for a home loan or a car loan? You have, you've done that, you've done that. So, you know, they're getting financial information on you, right? You know, and they've validated these models using multiple regression. They have lots of people they've given car loans to, for example, and they have lots of records on their financial information. And they can also see how many car payments they've missed. And so they can predict number of car payments missed. And they'll put in different types of financial information until they find just that combination that predicts well person's actual number of car payments missed. And now they've got a good predictive model. So then you come along and you are applying for a car loan, and they're going to ask you those particular questions, okay? And it's going to go that particular financial information, and each one of those questions about your salary, your debts, assets, debts, asset debt ratios, salary, various things, financial information, is going to go into a regression equation, and they're going to make a prediction about you, or about you providing them with that information, or Vanessa, you're providing them with that information. And they're going to make a prediction about how, and James, you providing that information. And they're going to make a prediction based on this now validated model as to how many car payments you're likely to miss. And that's going to play a big role in whether you get the car loan or not. So I like talking with students about this because sometimes, you know, multiple regression as a predictive tool can get very abstract, kind of lofty and kind of out there. And actually, it regards very real things. You've each been affected by it in terms of decisions that have been made about you, based on predictions that have been made about you, based on these regression models. So it's a real thing, and the predictive area is a very real area. And that is what multiple regression does well. It does a good job at showing which models are better at prediction, which ones are worse, at validating models, so that then it can be taken on the road, go out to people, make predictions about them, and make better decisions about people, or at least that's the idea.